Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you. Steve Britton is a president of Laguna College of Art and Design, and I think he was just going to welcome everyone. Stephen, would you like to come up front?
Hello, Stephen. I'm going to borrow your microphone. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening, and a very warm welcome to you all to this incredible conversation that we're about to have, a panel discussion on artificial intelligence. And when I heard this was happening, I was really excited for lots of reasons, which I'm sure you'll share with us. And part of it is also the unknown and the sort of anxiety about what this means, but also the incredible potential. And you know, when you think about how long artificial intelligence has been around, at least the term and the application, you know, in the last year or so, I think we see a exponential kind of an explosion of knowledge and use of artificial intelligence in all different sectors that are having a huge impact. And of course, it's going to have a huge impact on art and design. And we're particularly interested to hear the thoughts of our panelists today about how it does impact us. If you've followed Elon Musk, he's had some precautionary notes about artificial intelligence, saying that it's ultimately going to outsmart all of us. That's a warning. Stephen Hawking had said it's maybe the best thing that's happened to humanity and also the worst. And if you think about artificial intelligence applications, AI in everything we do, following us on our smartphones, the fact that Google might know a whole lot more about us than our parents do and our friends, that's somewhat troubling, but also this is a part of our life. And then when you think about how some of the new and very recent sort of applications in softwares that I think have been developed only in this last year, where you can punch in some keywords and the production of a very sophisticated imagery emerges from that. And so what does that mean for us artists? And I'm so grateful for Peter Zakowski, chair of our MFA Painting and Drawing at LCAD, pulling this wonderful panel together. I'm going to let you make the introductions, but I want to thank the panelists very much for joining us, coming from some of them from afar, and very much look forward to the conversation. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm Peter Zakowski. I am the chair of the Master of Fine Arts program here at Laguna College of Art and Design. And probably like a lot of you, I've just been hearing a lot about AI art. And I did want to just explain one thing. AI in general, artificial intelligence, is too big of a topic for us to resolve. But we can take a chunk out of AI art and explore that concept. And we're not here to promote or even show images. It's really just to have a conversation about what this means, where we're going, how much anxiety is warranted, how much exuberant optimism is warranted. And we've got a variety of really accomplished panelists that will address those issues. So I think we're in for a treat. We also will definitely take questions from the audience. If you're shy by nature, my telephone number is over there. You can text me a question if you like, provided it works, which is another issue with AI. But I think what I'd like to do is maybe start at this end of the table with Ryan. If you could introduce yourself, and each panelist will introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you do, and if you could briefly describe your current relationship with AI art.
Sure. My name's Ryan Darling. Nice to see you all coming out today. So my background is 3D modeling and illustration with a little bit of animation. My bread and butter was medical illustration and animation. So I worked for a local company here in Rancho Santa Margarita called Applied Medical. And unfortunately, I didn't have any AI to work with at the time before I had left, but worked there for about 18 years and then started coming back in to teach. So right now I'm teaching advanced ZBrush for level 400 class. And right now I've been working with AI since maybe February of this year. And the explosion that I've seen with AI has been more substantial in the last 8 months that I've seen versus the last 18 years in what I've seen in terms of capabilities. It's exciting. It can be a little bit scary. It all kind of falls into, I think, how you approach it as an artist. Really what I've been doing is just creating like a lot of illustration reference to work with in terms of like how I would translate that into 3D modeling.
Great.
Hi everyone, my name's Kathy Smith and I'm a professor at USC in the School of Cinematic Arts and the Expanded Animation Research and Practice Program. I probably best describe myself as a media artist, new media artist, although I come out of painting and drawing and fine art and I still incorporate all those practices in my work, and even with using AI I will continue to do that. So my relationship with AI has been mainly through just watching the growth and understanding how it's going to impact everything, in particularly our field. But also I've been a collaborator with Dr. David Hansen and his robot Sophia really since 2007 when he first sort of iterated and created her. On that angle, you know, I'm not an expert in AI at all, but I really think it's going to have, you know, really creative input into our work in the future. And I work with it at school through my dream class. I have a class called Animation, Dreams and Consciousness. And in my own work, I use it to sort of visualize, using keywords, some of the dream moments that happen for our students. We also use it to iterate, you know, in terms of layout and creating 360 panos. So we're already incorporating, I mean, it's in every facet of the software from Maya to Adobe Sensei. So it's already there. We're already working with it. I'm also interested in this idea of consciousness and this collective unconscious. And I think in a way, the whole database that's forming with AI is a way for us to even layer on top of our own collective unconscious. So I think there's really interesting things happening. And I actually liked what Michael said on the Zoom session about the sort of emerging phenomena that happens out of AI. And I think there's a lot of mystery and creativity in that potential use of it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Pierce. I teach painting up at CLU, which is a liberal arts college in Ventura County. I've written a book about emergence, and I'm very interested in how emergence and artificial intelligence, image generation software work together, as Kathy says. I'm a journalist as well. I write quite a lot of art journalism for fine art magazines mostly. I think that's about it.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm Carl Dabsky. I'm a painter. I also teach drawing and painting here and there around. My interest in AI is more that it just one day took over my social media feeds. It just was everywhere. What is this? And I had to figure out what it is. And then of course, it's the images are pretty good. So I was interested in how they were made, which led me to kind of do some research into how the programs actually work, which kind of piqued my interest also in ideas of consciousness, actually. Like I think the way the programs are functioning is interesting and could be some sort of primitive parallel to what might happen in other people's brains. That's my interest in it. Yeah.
I'm Michael Savas, Chair of Illustration and Dean of Undergraduate Studies. I teach the senior class in illustration, starting my 27th year at LCAD. I was here in the early days of Photoshop and some of the technology that LCAD implemented. I find it really interesting. My career was in advertising illustration in the 80s and 90s, pre-Photoshop, and then I was right at the time when Photoshop was introduced, so early on the digital, taught the first digital painting class at LCAD. So I have a lot of interest in the technology aspects and how we can implement them into our curriculum. I'm not an expert on AI. In fact, I've only played with it. What I've learned a lot from is from Ryan Darling, who contacted me to have a meeting, a 15-minute meeting, to maybe do a workshop or maybe a class on the topic, which turned into be about a 2.5-hour lunch. They charged me for valet. We were there so long. And I was really excited. So I've been doing a lot of research since then. I do have some legal concerns about commercializing the images and how that works, and also in academia, how to implement it into the curriculum in a positive way and avoid the pitfalls of plagiarism and those sorts of issues. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi there, my name is Steven Silpa. I'm a director producer working in advertising and corporate communications. My relationship with AI is definitely strained, but I'm open-minded and see what I can hear today that might change my mind. Taking a hard position right away.
Michael Pierce, I would like to see if you'd be willing to answer the simple question of what is it doing? What is AI art doing?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so presumably we're talking about image bots rather than any other kind of AI at the moment. AI is actually a complete misnomer. This is not artificial intelligence at all. It's clever programming, but it's not intelligent. The computers do not have autonomy. They do not have personality, and they're not imaginative. They imitate something that looks like imagination, but it's not human imagination. So the image bots presently are using a system known as Stable Diffusion. Usually, Stable Diffusion is set up on the basis of a generative adversarial network. So imagine there are two supercomputers, and they're big computers. And now I don't know computers like you guys know computers, but they're big computers. They're supercomputers. And these two computers have an argument with each other about the material that's coming back and forth. The model that they're using, the Stable Diffusion part of this, is fairly straightforward. The one computer has a gigantic database which comes out of Germany, which has, I think, 4 million images or some stupidly big amount of images in it. And these images are all keyworded with sentences that describe what they are and what they look like. The other computer doesn't have any of that. Now, the model is that the images in that first computer have all been broken down to a field of diffusion. They're just static, nothing. But it's broken down in steps. Now, the first computer has that database, which is all keyworded, and a series of steps of broken down images, right? When the user puts in keywords, the computer looks for those keywords and says, okay, these images have those keywords. Now, you're thinking in terms of millions of images, so every time you put in those keywords, there are many, many images that are being selected which have those keywords. It sends images to the other computer. The other computer says, okay, we're going to reverse the process from a field of static towards creating an image that satisfies those keyword inputs. Do you see how this works? So it's clever. It's reversing the static degradation of the image, that process of degradation. It's turning it backward and saying, okay, here's something that looks like a dog in that field of static, and the most broken down layer that we find it, and this makes it even more like a dog, and this makes it even more like a dog. Do you see how this works? So that's basically what's happening with Stable Diffusion models. There are some other things going on, but nearly all of the present image bots work from Stable Diffusion. Oh, I should add that Stable Diffusion has been made into free software, so anyone can take it and use it and change it and kind of confine the database of images, use different databases of images, so you do get different results out of all these different devices that can work.
It's also been designed into a Photoshop plugin,
Right.
so you don't even have to leave Photoshop to work with it. Free, yeah, that's true. And there's videos out there on how to install it.
The most popular ones are used online, and you don't even have to download any software or anything like that. Have any of you used Midjourney AI? If you want to get onto it, get onto Discord, which is a gamer platform, which, by the way, is important in the development of this imagery, because the user base is a gamer user base. That's why we're seeing imagery that looks the way it does, because the gamer users are young. They're quite often 15-year-old boys, many of them, and so you're getting sort of 15-year-old boy imagery. Just explains quite a lot, doesn't it?
So as you're describing it, it's the generative adversarial networks, right? One of them is, if I understand it correctly, it's called the generative system, and then one is the discriminatory system,
Yeah,
right? So
correct,
it goes
yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah, and they
argues
argue with each other. Yeah,
until the discriminatory one is convinced that it's
yeah, that looks like a
satisfied.
dog.
There we go.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. That's hey, I read a Wikipedia article and some magazine articles, so take that with a pinch of salt. But that's pretty much how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, questions are definitely allowed, and I know the panelists are going to want to ask each other questions. But yeah, if you have one to pose, definitely.
Very quick question, Michael. Are these keywords limited to English, or can they be Sanskrit? Can they be German?
Yeah, I'm not sure. As far as I know, it's English. I'm seeing users on Discord who are obviously coming from other countries, and so I think it's English keywords.
This big German supercomputer, I'm just wondering if it only...
Yeah, I don't know.
I believe there are other languages. It even works off of emojis.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen some of those. They're quite good, actually.
Kathy, would you like to add anything to this conversation at this point?
No, but I think actually Michael summed it up really well, what was actually happening with the AI. I've also, just working with David and also with some software some of you might know, which was Massive AI, was driven by a fuzzy logic language. So there's this coding capacity that happens with programs like Python. That seems to be the main one that people work with on the AI. And the things that I think are really interesting coming up that I think are going to be somewhat disruptive, but things we need to be mindful of in the whole sort of emergence of AI, media and art, is just the sort of imagery that's becoming prevalent and the people that are actually contributing to the images, but also the programming, because, the demographic tends to be predominantly male, and, there's also diversity, equity and inclusion issues. So I think they're really interesting facets that are coming through in terms of the way images are created, the way people are depicted. That's always been a part actually of the digital arts that I've seen in software packages. That's an ongoing sort of dialogue that even Unreal Engine and MetaHumans, if you've seen MetaHumans at all, they're trying to address that. So I think in the AI realm, there's a lot of, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting and sort of, I wouldn't say necessarily controversial, but there's areas that I think we have to be mindful of. And I think the more artists and people that are really aware of that, working in the field and starting to contribute to it, I think that will also help the way that it evolves into the future. And it's something that I talk about with David quite regularly, because in robotics, that's a very particular area, and it involves vision, speech, and voice, recognition. So there's a lot of, again, programming involved in that. It's different to what, the sort of systems that are coming up, the GAN systems, which are actually allowing images to be generated. But I think there's a lot of areas that are intersecting, and I think these are the things I'd just like to raise. It's going to be a really interesting time to see how people that don't necessarily get access to these systems, how they can work with it and what sort of imagery will arise, and how that's perceived. I think there's a lot of in there to unpack.
Stephen, I'd like to, you and I have talked a little bit about how should we think about this topic. Can you dive into that?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different issues. I mean, being a working artist as a human, there's a lot of issues involved in that, what your influences are, how you're feeling, what you're perceiving. So we look to, we start thinking about computers. I mean, Michael was just saying, they're not imagining anything.
They're not imagining.
They don't have a
in the human sense of imagining.
Right, a creative imagination, which is where it's all at, right? So I mean, I'm always talking about not giving these systems too much power, because they have an enormous amount of technical power, but we've got all the creative power, and they're only feeding from our creativity. So I mean, that's they have their own power in their own way. Excuse me. But it's still where the humans, we still have the artistic expression, the real power. So, how we think about them, I think, is important in terms of how we deal with them. So when I say them, and I'm talking about robot machines that are going to take over, but the systems that we use and the tools that we use, I think it's important to frame it in its proper perspective. Which it's a huge thing now, obviously, and will only get more prevalent. But I think it's the right time, right in the beginning, to start thinking, start trying to define what it is more specifically, so we don't get overwhelmed. That's generally where I'm coming from.
Michael, did you want to elaborate on?
Oh, sure.
It's not creative, but it does make art. Is that your position?
Yeah, I think what is the? Oh God.
What is that? You said you weren't going to ask that.
I didn't want to go this way.
We probably can't define art, but
What is art,
Does
right?
does it make art?
I actually find that a lot of the conversations about the art thing, not to cut you off, Michael, but is that so much of the conversation about it being art is the AI generating art or whatever is so obvious, comes from this sort of commercial sort of mindset. Like in terms of the fine art world, most of the people that I know, they're looking at this as sort of an amusing thing, as interesting. They're not worried about it at all. Like they're not. It's like, oh, that's amusing. That's kind of interesting, and that's because, it's the theories and philosophies of art have already gone to the point. Everybody is already an artist. Anything has the possibility of being art. So like, it's just another thing. Of course it's art. I mean, that's not even the interesting question really for them. So I feel that most of the discussions about it being art or creative is coming more out of the commercial applications of it. So I feel like a lot of it is tinged with economic and social issues and things like that more than that. At least from the fine art world, they don't even really seem to even be batting an eye at this.
Some of them are. There is an existential anxiety about this, which I'm kind of hearing from you. And I don't think fine art really, as you say, Carl, a lot of them don't care. And it doesn't really matter. You don't go to an art museum to see computer-generated art. You sit at home in your underpants and with a cup of coffee and a whiskey and
You're describing my smoking marijuana.
Is that what you do? and you look on your screen. You certainly don't go to an art museum to see digital art, or very rarely. Right? I mean, sometimes curators try to put digital art shows into museums, but they never really work very well. Because why would you go? You don't need to. You go to an art museum to see the real thing. And that's not going to change, really. That's not going to change.
Michael, what if we're already seeing, like in photography, where a whole host of technologies could make a photo look so good that what we think of as the talent of a photographer is affected? Well, if the computer can do it, then the photographer must not be that talented.
I think it's totally changing the world of photography. I already can't tell when I get on Facebook occasionally, most of the time, and scroll through my Facebook feed, and I can't tell anymore what's a real photograph and what's AI, because I've been looking at AI since February. Now in February I could tell what was AI, but now I can't. Not at all. Right. And I've been in landscape groups on Facebook for a long time, landscape photography, and I can't tell when those photos are real or if they're complete fantasies anymore, because the AI is so good at it. So I think photographs are really disputed. And what is a photograph anymore? If you're putting it into a computer, and every photographer puts it into a computer now. Right. I don't think anyone does untouched photography anymore, do they? So we're in a new world. As far as photography goes.
We've got an eager question in the back, I think.
This is kind of going with your question about, or your statement about people don't go to the gallery to see computer art. So
of course they do occasionally.
I'm not, which you said, but I guess for me, what I'm wondering about from your perspective is, would that change if AI meets 3D printing? Where now you have a physical tactile surface, you've got something that emulates impossible oil paint. You have, like, right now it's just computer screens, but the way that these technologies are converging, at some point it may be that it's very difficult to differentiate what is a physical piece versus digital piece.
Right. So as far as I understand it, the question you're asking is 3D printing could replace the tactile imagery of oil painting, for example, or sculpture.
Would you think that would be now a kind of a game changer more? Because right now farmers are like, I'm not threatened by the screen artwork because people want to see my brush strokes.
Right.
Yeah, but you could take an AI generated image right now and put it. There's a machine called Van Gogh bot that makes paintings. Based. You could feed it into a Van Gogh bot and it could paint it. You could do that already. It's like,
And 3D printing. You can print a house now. It's kind of, you can print guns. It's kind of amazing. But it doesn't matter.
Maybe a angle people aren't necessarily anticipating if they're not worried right now, that they're kind of thinking, it does not affect me, but...
I don't think it's going to make any difference at all.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because we have automobiles that can go really fast, but we don't stop going to see athletic competitions because people run really fast. And we want to see chess players who are really good at chess and watch them play against each other, not against the computer. We've had computers that can beat humans for 30 years, but we still go to chess tournaments. Well, at least certain types of people go to chess tournaments, but we still do. And that's the same thing. Art isn't going to be any different.
I mean, it's interesting that you could take an AI generated thing and print it out with brushstrokes and everything, and it's interesting. And I think some people would find it interesting for some length of time, but after a while, I think the novelty just wears off, and then it's
Carl, last week you said something that stuck with me, and I've been thinking a lot about it. That was pretty profound. You were talking about the limitations that when you try to apply it to a practical situation. You said that you had difficulty getting it to do what you wanted it to do.
Yeah.
It was more about coming up with ideas that maybe when you're maybe blocked or something and you can't think of something, it kind of puts you on a path. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, I've been messing around with AI. I'm not as good at it as some people are, because it does take some knowledge of how to prompt it and coax it into doing what you want it to do. But I found that when I played around with it, if I tried to take an idea that I have a very specific idea for, that I'm trying to maybe I could get something out of it that would be useful, I have a really hard time getting it to do anything that I can actually use. It just is like almost, it's so difficult that it's almost, I would rather not use it. But if I'm not so narrow in my search of what I want, if I'm more open-ended and kind of I'm like, I just don't know, then it's actually more interesting, because then it just it does all kinds of weirdness. So I guess what I'm saying is it's hard to direct it in an extremely specific way. You can do specific things. I don't mean to say that you can't, but like if I'm trying to work something specifically, it's like I need it from a certain kind of viewpoint, and I need it from, there's all these requirements that would have to go into it. And I just can't get to do that.
Ryan, I would ask you the same question, Ryan.
Yeah, so I think that gap is starting to close. I've seen really good examples of people that are doing full-on comic book layouts, over-the-shoulder shots, worm's eye view, bird's eye view. They're getting specifically what they want. I have definitely run into that challenge where I'm trying to do something specific, and what I notice is, you have to approach it in a little bit more of an open-minded mindset, and then kind of let it give you the suggestions. But because you're working through such a large volume, you're kind of bound to find specifically what you want, even if you need to piece 3 or 4 images together to create the composition that you're looking for.
It's more like a slot machine rather than playing.
You know what? It's so funny that you say that. It's so funny that you say that, because when I first got my hands on this, it literally felt like I was sitting in front of a slot machine. It was hitting all the same notes, to the point where I was losing track of time. Things were getting neglected. My kids wouldn't see me for days. No, it was just... It's true, though. It definitely hits all of the neural pathways that you would find from sitting in front of a slot machine hoping to get something that you like.
Are you talking about addiction?
Yeah, a little bit. Hi, my name's Ryan Darling. I am addicted to AI, and no, it's definitely that powerful. When you have something at your fingertips that never gets tired, never wants to call in sick, it basically it's the best employee you could ever hope for.
Exactly.
We've got a few questions from the audience. Yes.
Wait, it's not really a question,
Okay.
but it was kind of
Sure.
This is from sort of previous topics, sort of the fine art and the AI art. So you talked about how people come to art shows. They're not coming for, like, as you'd come to a race, you wouldn't come to see automobiles go super fast, like you would come to see people come super fast. And then I think about, what if you go to a fine art show and just hypothetically, they have all these pieces on a wall, and let's say they're 3D printed, they have brush strokes, stuff like that, but they say they're from people, but they're not, they're from AI, they just say that. But
Do you respect liars?
no, I don't. So here's my point. I think if you go to that art show, you go there and you see all these people who go there are extremely like disimpassioned by what they're seeing. You know, you see all this AI generated art, you don't even know if it's by AI, but on a subconscious level, I don't think people would engage with it as much because it doesn't have the same intentionality and sensibility and care that you would see in something done by humans, which I think, even if you can't tell it on a subconscious level, it's something you kind of understand and know. I think caring and I guess feeling a certain way about art is something that's just this quality.
If it's created to look like a three-dimensional object, so if I get it right, it's 3D printed or it's printed by robots and look to resemble handmade art, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The content, though.
Yeah, I don't think people would be aware. We were having this conversation last week, and I remember Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe, and then dove flies off, and all that, and it feels like that. There's amazing AI art being made. It's extraordinary.
But we have to remember that the art world is bigger than that also.
Right.
Remember that Duchamp has exhibited things like snow shovels and like wine racks. So it's like saying that it was made by human hands and that's what makes it so uniquely a work of art. The fine art world has gone past this. Like this is ancient history in terms of the modern world already. This is like way over 100 years old. Like I don't think that's why I say there's no problem in the fine art world with it. Like whether it was made by a human hand or not is like hardly even the question anymore. So
there's certain paintings that have a history of themselves, right? So a painter painted at a certain point in history, it was stolen by one government and went over here, and then it inspired these people to do this, and then 100 years later you're looking at it in a museum. It matters who made it, but then that question is, there's just so much more that's in that physical object that isn't done by a computer or by the human.
There's a context of history and time,
all of that,
social aspects,
right?
And that you can mimic it, but it's not the same. Plus, making art is fun. I like to see splashes of paint because I could tell the artist was having fun. I haven't seen that yet in some of the AIs.
You can simulate it.
I would say that it's more than just fun. It goes back to what Michael was saying in terms of like you go to a race to see people run fast. You go to whatever the examples were, the chess example. Like one of the reasons why we like to see art by other people is because we'd like to have seen like what it was they do. There's some kind of excellence or virtue in it, in the same way that you could have with sports or chess or something. And I think that like that all goes into it as well. It's fun. You're right. It's absolutely fun sometimes, but sometimes it's not. But there's like way more to it than that. It's like. Yeah.
Can I just add just intentionality, I think what you said, because that's what's really helping us create the AI image in the first place, because it's a database of images that somehow we've created in the first place that it's drawing from and recreating again. So, and then it can do something quite amazing. So I think as an artist, and I think scientists, I don't think you have to just be an artist, poet, anyone that can write and trigger these images, that's actually, I think, exciting for a lot of people to be able to visualize and imagine. So I think intentionality is the key thing in your ideas.
I don't think they're actually visualizing when they do it, though. I think it's an amazing tool, and you're writing prompts, but I don't think the person doing the prompts is necessarily actually doing the visualization there. I think what they're doing is they're giving this machine, this game, whatever, certain kind of prompts, and maybe they have some vague notion of what they're looking for. But the machine itself is actually doing the quote-unquote visualizing.
I think sometimes, though, Carl, not to be contrary, but I think...
You can be contrary.
Yes, okay, I'll be contrary. I think actually, no, I think it's doing both. I think some people go to it with a visual image in mind or upload an image, but also just a prompt of like even an image you had in mind, a dream, and put that in there and then see the AI comes out with something like that. And I've actually had almost some images that I've actually drawn out and it's just created exactly what I was imagining. So there's an interesting moment there.
I'm going to be contrary now. My experience is that that when I work with people, because I've had to do it a lot, when you get them to have to realize the thing that they're visualizing, or even I'll speak for myself. I try to imagine something, I try to draw it, and I'm fairly competent at drawing things out of my head. And there's always something I cannot take account for. So what I'm saying is that I actually didn't visualize those things. I'm not it's not there. Like you can, as you work through it, you come to a stopping point, you realize there's nothing there anymore, right? It's just empty. And so I think that is actually the natural state. And so a lot of times when people are saying, I have this image in my head, I actually think most of the time that they don't.
I think it's a good point, because I think it's the act of actually creating from the mind to the hand, and things come out in a certain way. And I think that's in a way what AI is showing us too. So I think there's interesting.
Yeah, I want to get some input from the audience. There's a few people have been really eager to speak up. I believe you had a question, and then in the back, and then also over here.
Yeah, you were talking about like coaxing the AIs with like prompts and stuff. What's your thoughts about like image uploaded ones where it imprints after you've drawn an image?
What you were saying in terms of like trying to get that solid direction with image prompting, you can definitely get like more of an exact result, and it's a great way to just kind of play around with thumbnails. If you fill up a page full of thumbnails in 30 minutes or so, just a bunch of chicken scratches, using the compositional relationships of the hierarchy that's built into those thumbnails can definitely be celebrated with the output of AI. And AI, I think it's important to understand that you need to look at it like any kind of system. It's a system that takes in raw data and it outputs a result, a product, if you will, right? So it's like anything that we have out there in terms of like manufacturing, right? Where you're working with raw material and you're putting together something for, a common goal, I guess. All of that can be negotiated in a way that is right now I think is a little bit just superficial. As things start to kind of get developed and refined, everything is going to be a lot more straightforward, I think. In fact, there are companies that are working on trying to make it more modular and less code dependent on building your own custom AI for your business relations, which is kind of scary because for me, that's putting the cart before the horse, where I really feel like regulations and the legalities of everything that AI can touch on needs to be addressed first. We are so far behind on the conversations that need to be had on a government level when it comes to AI and what it's capable of doing. The EU recently just had their first AI Act proposal submitted about a month ago. Yesterday, I read that the US just had their first AI Act submitted from the White House to try to get in front of everything that it's doing right now with AI. You talk about stable
Ryan,
diffusion.
If I may interrupt.
Yeah.
I read an article on Forbes about that, and I took a quote. Data scientist Danielle Abrega, she sits on the White House Task Force for AI Policy, and she's very concerned about the copyright. She was shocked about some of the artists that were complaining that their work was being mimicked too much. And some artists, and I think
Greg
Michael
Grotowski.
yes, was concerned that he was seeing more renditions or variations of his own work.
His name got prompted like 90,000 times, right?
He's crazy. He's mad. He's crazy. He's getting more publicity out of this than he ever got as a magic artist.
There's that, but
it's huge.
His name has been prompted more than 90,000 times, and one of the prompts that used his name was to create an NFT that sold for like 22,000 or something like that. So yeah, I'd be upset too, but this is I think where regulations really need to go into it.
I have no sympathy whatsoever.
Because he's already hit success?
No, it doesn't matter. Vincent van Gogh could be complaining about all the people who like Vincent van Gogh. You can't copyright style. You can't. It's impossible. You can copyright trademark infringement. So if you do SpongeBob SquarePants doing something obscene, then they're going to come after you. CBS will definitely come for you. And CBS are already considering dropping the atomic bomb on trademark protected cartoon images, by the way.
I think that there's something to be said about a style being created from an artist that's being used as a stepping stone for everybody else to climb on top of. So when I talk about regulations, I honestly believe that if your name is getting prompted like 1,000 times or more in a certain platform, you should receive some sort of residual for that.
So what
And
happens when
that
Leonardo
can be
DiCaprio's
built.
name gets like put in there then?
Yeah, I think
So
that
I actually spoke to a
we're
copy-
paying a subscription for using some of these platforms like Mid-Journey. There's money that's flowing through that should be redirected to people that are getting prompted.
What
I
you're
actually spoke
suggesting
to a
is
copyright
censorship,
lawyer
right?
yesterday about this. Yeah, yesterday, and he most definitely said that style is not copyrightable. It will not be copyrighted, and it would. He thought it was absolutely insane to even think it should be able to be copyrighted. So I think this on the style grounds, there's no way. And then in terms of fair use, the whole issue comes up with whether or not the system has changed the images enough for them to be considered not a copyright violation. And in his view, given the laws as they stand right now, which could always change, for instance, there's that case in front of the Supreme Court right now with the Andy Warhol and the photograph of Prince, right? Which is funny because it's the same court ruled in favor of. Anyway, so it's like this. It's almost like they're changing their minds. But unless they somehow restrict fair use right now, as it stands, these things are going to not be under copyright at all.
Ultimately, though, these companies are putting the onus on the artists. They have a disclaimer that, hey, whatever you create, if you get sued, we are not going to help you. We're not going to get involved.
And if they wanted to, I spoke to him about that, and he even added that if the company wanted to really cover their bases, what they would do is they would say, like, you'll have to sign an agreement that says you will not do whatever. And then if they really wanted to, they could even ban certain things. So like if somebody was making infringements on Batman or Mickey Mouse or whatever, they would just ban the words Mickey Mouse and whatever in the searches, and then they would have no legal liability anymore.
I think that they could also limit databases if they dropped the atomic bomb on trademark infringement like Mickey Mouse, for example. And Disney have done that in the past, and we've all heard about those cases.
If there was a technical way to measure when somebody modified an image, say you took an image and you wanted to repurpose it for something, and if there was a technical way, which some people think there could be, each time you modified that, the artist would get a half a cent or a half a cent, or
That's
whatever.
what I would like to see happen.
Yeah, and then as that image keeps getting modified, the money keeps going back.
Yeah,
Is that something that would solve anything?
There was a question in the back, please.
So I think that's something that a lot of the students here care about. Most of us are aspiring artists trying to go into the industry. How is AR going to start affecting? Because like we all know, like as you guys have iterated, fine art is not affected by this. But what about commercial art?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I think this is where
So the question is how will this
Existential angst.
how will this affect commercial art? Correct? Yeah. Who would like to, Michael? Maybe we can start with
I
you. on
remember when
this.
stock photography and artists were selling their portfolios for like $300. You can get on a CD back in the day. It really hurt the industry a lot. A lot of commission jobs went away. It was horrible. The work that involved specificity, like doing a product for a specific trademark, that stuff stayed around, but it hurt the industry, and I think this will too. I think that the industry and the artists will have to learn how to adapt and take that technology and use it in a positive way. And I'm an optimist, but I have some concerns. I think it will hurt a certain segment of the industry. Comics, some comic artists are really concerned. Right now, though, where it is right now, it's not quite there. It can't really do sequential art really well. It has a problem with anatomy, fingers, things like that. But I think it's a matter of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, regarding sequential art, it's able to produce video now,
It's
so
figured
it can
out
go
now.
from like one frame to the next.
So I'm excited about image to image. Right now, a lot of it's text to image.
Yeah.
But if Nike has a whole base of just their trademark images and they pull from that and create new content, that is exciting to me. I don't know. I'm excited about the future, but I am worried about. I don't have the answer, and I'm trying to think, how would I use this? And if I were freelancing, I'm not doing that these days. How would I use it for a client? I think I would use it to brainstorm, to come up with ideas if I'm stuck. I see it really hurting, like I said, stock or
Graphic artists.
yeah, in spot illustrations. Like, let's say a company wants to put an image in their finance section in their annual brochure, and they type in $, coins, money bags. They'll come up with an image they can use.
Yeah.
Well, that's putting.
I think
work.
concept artists are in trouble.
Concept artists for sure.
You know, I edit a magazine for the Philosophical Research Society, and I don't bother looking for stock photography anymore. It's
So
just
it's
not necessary.
already hurting the industry. I suspect.
Yeah, Getty Images won't allow for any submission of anything generated on AI, and then Shutterstock jumped on that the same day.
When stock imagery came out, I adjusted my career. I started doing more technical stuff that had to be very specific to the product. And when some of my colleagues were really suffering in terms of getting work, I was doing fine. So I think you need to navigate the waters. Editorial is kind of dried up because of that.
Yeah.
Even for stock, it's going to be worse now.
The AI does editorial illustrations so well.
We had a few questions from the audience. I think, Steve, did you have a question? And then this gentleman here. Okay, and then there's one right behind you too. So I'll try to get the audience worked into this too.
When you guys mentioned concept art, I wanted to ask this question before I came here because it reminded me, thinking about AI, how 3D was introduced in the 2000s and how it impacted traditional animators. And I thought this most similar thing to that now would be how would AI impact the concept art industry, because basically the job of a concept artist, you get told this idea and they produce a bunch of iterations on this, and AI literally does that exact same thing.
Right.
If you guys think it will impact the concept art industry the same way 3D impacted the 2D animation industry back then.
It's certainly going to be able to do that in terms of iterations. Like, I mean, it can do that in spades. I think it'll impact the industry significantly because if you need a bunch of stuff, you got an AI that can do it. I mean, you don't need so many people anymore. I don't think that means all of the work will go away, because you need somebody to kind of keep the direction in the right way, and you need to. I mean, the AI is not perfect. It needs to be fixed up and cleaned up and stuff like that for sure. I don't think all of it will go away, but I think it could have a significant impact for sure.
I think as this develops, and it's broad already in range, but we're in the first 3 months of this.
Yeah.
It's going to expand. And I think one really important thing is going to happen is that individual companies are going to develop their own databases of imagery.
Yeah.
And that's going to change everything. If you're let's go back to SpongeBob SquarePants again. If you're CBS, you're going to have a database of SpongeBob SquarePants imagery, millions of them. And your art director isn't going to hire a concept artist anymore. They're going to program a computer and say, we need SpongeBob throwing a brick, and they'll get it.
Or you could very easily, if you were, say it was a video game project or something, say like they don't have a super huge budget or whatever, the art director could just go ahead and like crank out like mood images and stuff like that. I mean, what do you need a bunch of people to do it for? Like one guy could do it.
Right. And in the end, it's all economics, right? If I've got a computer in front of me and it costs me $1 to do it, my Midjourney account eats $20 at a time, but I don't have to hire a concept artist. So if I'm a cheap art director, I'm not going to hire a concept artist.
And the question is the art director skilled and educated in art?
It doesn't matter.
Or is it accounting?
Well, it kind of does though, because there's a definitive visual difference between somebody that's 15 in their basement getting their hands on AI and somebody that knows how to speak the language of hierarchy and value and rhythm and all of that stuff. I think I'm a little bit more in line with Savez, where I believe that I'm just more optimistic about it. I think AI is not just going to elevate us. I think it's going to create so many jobs that we're going to have a problem trying to fill. And the reason I say that is because of media intake right now. Right now, what we're exposed to with social media, everything that's on our phones, I think is going to pale in comparison to what life is going to be like 20 years from now, when we're living in a metaverse, in a world that's overlaid with AI and art and AR in our everyday visual activity. It's going to demand so much content for people to create, because you can't necessarily expect AI to come up with something new. It's going to be limited to the data set that it's tapped into. So you are going to need people to work with to ingest new information into that, skilled people that can do an adequate job and not just be somebody that knows how to be colorful with words. It's going to take some real skill to be able to push that consistently.
Right, but it's a different kind of skill. It's a poetic and curatorial skill. It's not the same as I love painting, but it's not that skill. It's a different world. It's a skill of writing the prompt right, about doing a thumbnail sketch and importing it, and then letting the AI do all the work. The AI is what does the work here.
I'm a painter, so I'm purely analog from that sense, but I'm fascinated by all this. My question for commercial artists in the room, and maybe this is going to derail it, but does NFTs sort of play a part in this as far as like preserving any income coming from?
Yeah, the question was, do NFTs play a large part in this arena?
That's a different can of worms. So I don't know if we want to go there. I don't know. I think it'll just compound the issue. There's just more venues to make NFTs. It's just going to be another generator. Yeah. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think actually NFTs are a great way, again, for artists to have their work seen and to have control over the iterations of their work and to keep being able to make money and a living off their work. So I actually think it's going to go hand in hand to a certain degree. And I mean, that's the other big disruptor is NFTs. And I actually wanted to say something about the previous question too, because I lived through that period of going from, hand-drawn painting right into the digital realm. And, you had to program in the early days of 3D. You had to be able to do coding before there was even a graphic user interface. And so I think what all of you could do in terms of your education is to get as much knowledge as you can about what's evolving with AI, and even just basic programming to understand it. It's not like you've got to be computer scientists, but even if you're working with someone, and you've got a gaming department here as well, and there's certain people doing coding. So I actually think it's a great time to be an artist, for anyone to be able to harness all these technologies and what's happening with AI. And it's still going to be about ideas always. And you're, as Michael said, I agree, it's going to be data sets. You're going to have your own data set. You might go out and create, a certain texture and look to your paintings, and you take that in and then you iterate in the AI. So I think it's an enormous potential. I'm like Ryan, I'm very positive about it. There is the downside, deep fakes. There's a lot of things going on, and I think areas we do have to be mindful of. But the more artists who are involved and humanists, I think it's a good thing.
I have a question over here.
I can't help thinking we're obviously at a historical inflection point with AI. And I'm reminded of Walter Benjamin's article on art in the age of mechanical production. In the 1930s, there was this moment of fear that this, mechanical production would actually replace the art. And in this, there's a lot of history repeating itself, it seems. And I'm wondering whether our fears, our collective fears here as artists, is that we lose the authorship. We lose somewhat authenticity as well, because we don't know who created it. So the single creative genius trope is now out the window. And we're now faced with this idea that maybe we won't even be recognized for our artwork. Maybe through NFTs we'll get lots of money for it and we can commercialize it. But this sense of loss of authorship is, I think, something that is in all of our minds.
Can I just jump on that really quick? So, yeah, I definitely see a lot of parallels with the concerns that have hit many times in the past. There was the camera saying that paintings are dead. I would argue now that there are more painters in the world since the camera has been developed than there were back then. Same with Photoshop too. A lot of people thought, concept designers, graphic designers, all of that was just going to go by the wayside. A lot of jobs were going to be killed. Again, we have way more of the people that can do that skill set, and I think that's what AI is going to introduce as well. So that's why I look to the parallel and say, I honestly believe that there's going to be just a need for a very large amount of artists in the coming decade or too.
But it will affect some people.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
there are no more very few dark rooms left. We used to teach airbrushing and wet photography.
Make
at
an
LCAD.
omelet without breaking an egg.
When Photoshop came out, we took Studio 6 and made faculty offices. It's gone.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
It's changing. There will be a loss of livelihood in some areas, but that's
It's
adaptation.
just the pain of change.
I want
think
to
it
pick up
might
on
be
the
a-
authorship again.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it might be a bigger problem than that, only because we do expect with new technologies that there's going to be changes that change the marketplace, that change what people want. But this is, I don't know if there's artists that were calling for AI in art and saying, you know what, there's this huge gap here, and I wish the Silicon Valley companies would create something to help us, create these crazy images. So, but that's okay, because a lot of great things happen by accident, and they happen as a convergence of things. But to your point, I think we have agency in how we think about it. We don't. Even your question was kind of framed as like, well, all this is happening to us. How are we going to survive this? And I think it should be, these are our creations. We have a say in how we use it, more than a say. It's very seductive, obviously. It's very exciting. It's very interesting. But I'm not sure that anybody wants the technology to actually displace artists. And we've all, you've all made a lot of good points about that.
I
Nobody wants
disagree
that.
with you. People
Okay.
do want that. It's not us. It's not the artists who
Well,
want
the
it.
clients, they want
the
that.
clients want it.
Yeah.
The clients
In that
follow the
sense.
money.
But
Yes.
I think it's important to approach the future from a baseline of unbiasedness as much as possible versus a negative thought. And I think that's probably a trend that's going around in this room right now, is that a lot of people are concerned about, why did I go to art school for the last 3 or 4 years only to find out that my job can be done in 60 seconds with 4 examples? And it breaks my heart to see people approach the bench like that. Mm-hmm. You need to think in terms of, how can this help me out? How is this going to streamline? How do I get home to my kids at 5? Is this going to be something that will allow that? Because I can tell you that from the last 18 years, there have been a lot of moments that I got to miss out on in life that I didn't get to have because I was working so much trying to get to that point where I was a great artist, and I'm still trying to get to that point. But now this alleviates a lot of what I have to consider in terms of color and composition, and there's so many happy accidents that can be celebrated with what you can do with AI. And I think that's really what we need to come at this with.
That's exactly what the employer's going to think.
Cheap imagery. It's cheap imagery.
I want to go back to you brought up authorship and mentioning Walter Benjamin, and I guess I have it's a very complicated issue for me, because it's not just Walter Benjamin with that. It's also, there's the death of the author, Rothbard, and then there's the intentional fallacy and all of these things that come around where it's very deflationary in terms of authorship, and so it's been around in the fine art world for however long already. But I also want to kind of broaden the scope and realize that our notions of artistry and authorship kind of come about in the Renaissance and are crystallized in the Romantic era, and that there were many they were maybe called artists, but in the medieval era that we don't even know who they were. They labored over these things, and they did them not for, they obviously did them for commercial reasons, but they also did them as like a labor of love to excel at their craft and all of these things. So it hasn't always been the case that people have labored for the fame or the recognition of their brand name on something. And I know that doesn't totally wrap everything up, but so it's not like they had the names on things in ancient Greece, and then immediately didn't, and then they do again. So I don't know where that will go, but it's authorship is already a complicated issue, even from a scholarly angle. So.
Certainly, and I don't raise it in defense of authorship, just to say that is a recurring theme, and there is that fear factor of losing that, but there isn't a reason to.
But I think philosophically, from a philosophical angle, like the authorship part has already been lost. So this is, it's not really a concern exactly, right? Like, think of how many people use fabricators or ready-mades or whatever. There's like this is already not an issue. It's more of an issue in the general consciousness of society, I think, mostly because most of us have a knee-jerk viewpoint of the artist in sort of a romantic light. You know what I mean? Like the visionary, the one who is like the shamanistic person who visualizes all, like that's the kind of image we have, but that's kind of already like, I mean, it's very much alive in the culture, but in sort of the fine art academic halls, that's already kind of been a lost battle in a way. So.
There's a question from the audience.
Now I'm utterly confused with all that because it's like this huge scope of AI, and I'm in the fine art world and teach and then work on my own work, and I've been ambivalent to use any of the AI for fear of handing my creativity over to something that will then influence my vision. And it, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it something where you can work on it to create your own style and your own voice? Or from what I've seen so far, things look so similar that's coming out of it. And maybe because they're generated from that certain pool, or I just don't know. And I think for me, I'm so protective of my own vision that and for students, how does a fine artist then, if they're using this platform, find their own unique voice? Like Karl Dobsky is Karl Dobsky, right? And if Karl Dobsky had taken...
There's two questions there. One is there a risk to creativity for the individual, and is it especially harmful for someone developing their own voice?
That was way better than how I put it.
I feel like everyone here would love to address that. I don't. Whoever did you have a particular person you'd like to hear from on that question?
No, I picked on Carl, but I'm just using him because he has a specific style. And imagine early on if he had handed that thought over to something else. But I understand collectively we take imagery in from everything in the world, right? So. But it seems so specific, like you're handing over these words and then it's coming up with these images, and how do you separate that, thinking of something and drawing something and creating your own idea of what you want. There's intention and nuance and all of this style that comes into it over time.
Will we be stunted by this technology?
Well, if some technique that you love and you think really is the technique that you use to express something is really, really tedious to do, and it takes you 3 hours to do it, and you can have it done in 5 minutes, you might resist it 10 times because you're like, I don't want that. That's just cranking it out, and then on the 11th time you'd be like, I don't have time for this. Using those shortcuts, if you want to call it that way, it has to feed back to you that you're not going through the process of doing it, which might affect your next move.
Yeah.
So and again, we have examples of that already in different fields, but yeah, I think the capabilities have to feed back into you, so where you begin to think about, is it worth doing it, or it's definitely worth doing it, or you lose a quality if you don't put the time into it. So yeah, I think it does affect the very, very, the foundations of the creative process.
I'd like to address that too. I think, I always talk about style, which is very important in illustration. Art representatives like to hire a team that have very different styles that they can sell to their client base. We want to encourage a natural development of style without forcing it onto the students. And I see it happen all the time in seniors. I can actually look at their work and I know who did it. I think that's an argument to study and pursue art. I don't think that's going to go away because these bots are borrowing from people's styles. And if we don't have that and there's not a rich pool, what's going to happen? I brought this up last week. It's like it's going to kind of keep feeding on itself, and what's going to happen? I think that's an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I see image prompting that's being used with AI that's being produced. And I recently just finished a beta class that was taught from a professor who teaches AI at Harvard. And he says one of the worst things that you can do is take the output of what AI produces and re-ingest that into the input, because you're basically getting a feedback loop, right, that you're creating. And I see that that's a lot of what people are probably responding to when they say it all looks the same. Well, yeah, because there are 3.4 million people on Midjourney right now who are probably under the age of 18 that are all putting this stuff together, that have no artistic history or education. And one takeaway that if you're a freshman and you're going into art school, don't cheat yourself. Don't pick up AI and think that it's going to be the end all be all for how you get through art school. One of the funniest things I saw as a freshman were all of the students that would come through somehow got a somewhat decent portfolio together, and then realized that they couldn't hack it because, all of a sudden art school is hard, when they thought that they were going to take the easy route through college. And they couldn't pass that first semester, and living it, I understood why. And you have to put in that hard work if you want to stand out, whether it's with a hammer or with AI. It's all about how you use that tool.
I do think it's about how you use the tool, and I think that this talk about will it make people more creative or less creative, I think is a red herring. I think that human beings are creative. They're creative in so many ways. Everything from how you could spin plates on the tops of sticks to nuclear bombs to blow people. And they will just keep creating things no matter what. And so I don't think it's going to make people more creative or less creative. I think what it is that it becomes like what you do and the habits you have are what you tend to become better at. So that if you say use the AI to generate thumbnails or to visualize something or whatever, it's very possible that maybe you just don't get as good at visualizing things, for instance, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means you haven't put in the work to do it, right? So that's why some people are saying that, well, that's why you should train and get the knowledge first and then whatever, and use it that way. So that's kind of how I think about it, is that you will get better at whatever it is that you do. And so it could be used in some way, but whenever you have something else do the thing for you, you're not really getting better at it. And I specifically think of it, that it can be a stumbling block in some ways, in the sense of like when you're trying to come up with something, you're trying to come up with an idea. And I've seen however many people, like they have a hard time coming up with the idea. And what they'll do is they'll find a photograph or something. And suddenly it's like their brain is just locked into this form, right? And they can't seem to get out of the ruts in that. And the AI could do the same thing. Like you see this image, you can't unsee it. And the reason why you can't get out of it is because you're not used to like just seeing it yourself and figuring it out yourself. So I don't think that necessarily makes somebody uncreative or creative, to be clear. It's just more a matter of practice and habit, kind of like you would if you played sports or chess or something. It's like if you don't, practice your swing, you're not going to be a good golfer or whatever, right? If you don't practice playing chess, you're going to suck at chess, It doesn't mean that you won't be creative. You just haven't put in the mileage yet. But,
the beauty of it is that you guys are on the forefront of this stuff. I remember when Photoshop came out, and when the Pentium chip came out, oh my God. You guys are on the forefront. Master it. You embrace it and be good at it.
It's absolutely an opportunity for everyone here picking it up right now.
It's easy.
You're going to be able to tell your grandkids. You can tell your grandkids. You can tell your grandkids. I remember when AI first came out. And, it's like when the iPhone came out or when Photoshop came out. Embrace it.
I was just wondering about the panel's thoughts regarding, kind of going back to the discussion of art theft in regards to putting images into these programs, and less of a style theft, because I understand what you guys are saying about you can't really copyright style, but more taking an artist's work that they already did, putting it into the program, and then the program spits out a very similar image. Or there's a very specific example that happened just a few days ago where someone was live streaming drawing their art, and they weren't done, but someone basically took a screenshot of what they were drawing
and then put it into a program and basically quote unquote finished it, then posted it a few hours before them. Then when the artist posted their finished drawing, the person who posted the AI finished art basically asked for credit because they're saying, you referenced my AI image, you have to give me credit. I was just wondering about your general thoughts on art theft in that sense.
Can you put that into?
Yeah, so I read the same story. The story is that an artist was live streaming making an image, and he did the drawing, or she did the drawing, and then someone else screenshot the drawing and then put it into the AI, and the AI completed it in the style of the artist who was doing the original drawing, and did it 5 hours faster than the artist did. And that's something that AI is capable of. And then asked for credit because he said that the original artist was copying the AI because it had been done 4 or 5 hours before the artist. So guess what's going to stop happening? No more live streaming of art.
Yeah.
I think that it's that that's where regulations kind of start to come into play. With any new technology, any new advanced tool, it's going to pull out criminals out of the woodwork. And, there's, that, and another case in point, somebody winning a show, an art show, art exhibit, I think, in Colorado. And I don't know if they passed it on like they did it or not.
No, it was signed as done by Midjourney.
Oh, okay. So yeah, and to me, that's borderline, but it still feels okay when I produce something that's fully done by AI, not being touched by my hands beyond prompting, and I sign it with my name. Yeah, that's definitely. That's not right.
I think it points at the seductive nature of this software, doesn't it? Because
it does.
All those people on Midjourney, when I started on Midjourney, there were 25,000 people using it on Discord. About 3 weeks ago, there were 1.2 million, and I thought, my God, that's a lot of people. This week, there's 3.4 million.
Something like that, 3.7.
It's definitely the most popular server on Discord, and of those 3.4 million people using it, I don't think more than 1% are artists.
No.
The rest of them are 15-year-old kids.
Right.
And they're having a ball.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, they've got access to something that resembles imagination.
So Midjourney is kind of like the entry point into AI for artists. There are all kinds of platforms and tools out there. There isn't a creative space that hasn't been touched by AI now. No. We have recently completed Beethoven's 10th Symphony, which he died trying to write, apparently. I haven't heard it myself. I don't know how great it is, but apparently that data set was enough of the previous 9 to complete the 10th. There is a video out there of Freddie Mercury singing K-pop, and it sounds great. I kind of like K-pop now, but I use it for writing blogs. I've been able to write I think 2 blogs in about 35 minutes, where I entered in with bullet points, and it was able to give me everything that I wanted, and kind of took my brain in a direction that I could touch on these topics too. So I mean, video editing, you name it. You start calling out different areas of art, and yeah, it's already tapping into it. So it's great.
Don't you think it points at authenticity again, though? With I think the human witness becomes more and more important. You can't trust photographs anymore; they're not real. They're AI generated. You can easily fake the tags. That's no big deal, right? So what's a true witness? Video isn't true anymore. So it makes us more what's the word? Liable, more responsible, right? The old Italian Renaissance idea of the fama becomes FAMA, not digging the ground.
Well, if authorship is to be basically the coining of a single perspective, this gives you multiple perspectives on how to approach a single problem. There's value in that.
We've had some, Kathy Smith and our team have had some interesting conversations about how AI can infiltrate all of the arts and bring the arts together. You talked about work in robotics and emotions and in the art world. And what you're saying, Ryan, is really interesting. So how do we think about it when we have specific assigned or designated disciplines that we are teaching, but there's a lot of crossover, and AI might be the bridge between all of that? Thoughts on that?
I think it's going to make all of us great storytellers in a way that we can't necessarily do or have the time to do right now.
I agree. And I also think in terms of, I think about scientists. I just spent a weekend away with physics and astronomy PhDs, and, scientists were artists. It's really only in the 20th century that people stopped really drawing and observing the physical world of nature. So for a scientist to be able to go there and prompt and say, I have a theory about this, can you visualize or can you put these words in what will happen? I actually think that's really empowering. And again, the idea of the artist, I think, I actually think we can all draw, and we're all artists, we just forget how to draw. And I think about the RNT women that we're working with in Central Australia who are also interested in working with AI, but their daily life is a practice of creation. So they don't say that they're artists. They're doing art all the time, but they don't say that they're artists. So, I think it's bringing up, I agree with the issues around, the auteur or the author and how that plays out, but I think it's, I'm feel a lot in alignment with Ryan. I think it's just going to sort of empower more people to actually be able to show their work, to iterate their work, to bring in their original organic work, and then to build their own database. I mean, there's a lot of downside. There's definitely a lot of things going on. I think the deep fakes, people, like that incident where someone was actually live, streaming them drawing, and that's the sort of thing that comes back to the sort of ethical issues that we all deal with in academia and as artists and as humans. We've got to keep all that in mind, and the more that we participate in the world, I think, of AI, the better, because then we can actually change and make it a better place and really pull people up when they're doing these things. So, and I don't know if that answered the question, but I think it's an enormous opportunity for people that haven't been necessarily visualizing either or thinking about prompting and actually doing that. I think there's a lot of opportunity.
What I'm hoping is for these 15-year-olds and these young kids who are still in high school getting their hands on AI for generating art, my hope is that this is going to create that spark for them to want to come to art school, to realize that they're only able to take it so far with AI, and now it's time for them to get the foundation, the fundamentals, to where they can take it to the next level.
Right, to your point, because I was thinking about asking the panel this. What role does AI play in art education? Or should it not?
I've been struggling with that.
If it does, which I think it should, at what level and how would that happen? Because you and I met initially to possibly offer a class in it.
Yeah.
And then we thought, well, maybe a workshop or something like that.
Right.
But it's moving so fast.
See, that's the thing. And we've been working together trying to get just a presentation on this. And I'm so glad that we did this tonight, because just coming back to you guys and reporting on like what's happening now, I haven't read anything on AI since last night when I came across that article about the White House. And I feel like I'm already starting to get out of the loop, because when AI first started coming out as something that you can get your hands on and start working with, there were updates that were coming into the news feeds, like maybe once a month. And now we've gone from once a month to bi-monthly to every week, now every day. My LinkedIn is filled with stuff that I just can't possibly get through because of all the AI connections with people that I've been making over the last 3 months or so. I don't see anything that's not AI unless I'm just cruising for a while, and then I finally come across, a Blizzard job board or something. But it's hard to keep up with. It's hard to say everything out there right now.
Are you finding that you look at images completely differently? I've been looking at AI for a long time, and I see paintings come up on my feed, and I just scroll past.
Yeah,
that's a bad one.
I'm looking at pipelines differently. How pipelines that have been traditionally celebrated in a corporate environment, how that's going to be changing. And that's where I see the need for like huge data sets and a mass amount of artists to help populate those.
Okay, I've got some questions. Gentleman back here, and then over here, and in the middle. So you first.
I'm wondering, for, say, fine artist who chooses to deliberately not use AI, just have a preference for their own creative process, would they be left behind then?
What would you pay more for? A wooden clock that's made on an assembly line, or something that's handmade by a person?
Well, to respond to that, I think there is an audience that would prefer the one made by a person, but there's also an audience who's not going to care either way.
Yeah.
I think AI imagery is cheap. And if I'm a 15-year-old kid, then I'm going to spend $1 on an AI image rather than spending money on an artist's image.
Yes.
And I think that has consequences.
There's some truth to that.
I think for sure that AI has deep consequences in class structure in a big way. And I think it's really important. The only people who can make AI imagery are people who have access to computers. And that matters. It's easy here. We're all bourgeois. You're at art school. You're bourgeois. Embrace your bourgeoisie nature, because that's what we are. That's who we are. And people who are poor can't afford this. It's just simple. It's economics.
That's true.
And
on
it's
the
going to
data
have a
sets.
huge impact. It's going to divide. AI is going to divide society even more than it is already.
Yeah,
Even a little more sinister is that in terms of the data sets and the input, it's not coming from huge swaths of the world because they're not producing digital imagery that's getting fed into the data sets. You're looking at the consequences of that potentially being their cultural perspective not getting, integrated into the digital. So.
Yeah, I think it's important also to understand that the prompts and the interactiveness that we have with AI is creating bias with the machine. So there have been case studies about, what's more likely to be the result of what you get when you type in successful CEO. Is it going to be a female? Probably not. Is it going to be anything other than a white male? Probably not. So we need to understand that's kind of, AI is like holding a mirror up to society, because that's what its data set is tapping into, society and how we interact with that. So yeah, I think that we need to understand that we need to play nice with it. We really need to play nice, because if we take it in a direction, it's just going to celebrate that direction and take off with it.
In a similar vein, what's the thoughts of oversaturation of art, especially when it's all kind of self-feeding back into itself?
Yeah. Is there a risk of oversaturation, too much art being generated?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's already happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going blind.
Yeah,
Really.
to your point. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I'm finding it hard to see art at the moment. I think I'm going to stop looking at AI for a while.
We already
I
have
think that speaks to just being able to visualize something like on your own in a way. Like that you should be able to come up with it on your own, because I think there's a shot at making something that's rather unique in a way, maybe not, but maybe rather, because you don't get the same oversaturation. Like I still look at other people's paintings. I'm still amazed by them. Maybe if I had to look at 800 a day, I would get sick of it, right?
Yeah.
But it's never going to happen like that. And back to your question, to answer it very simply, I'll tie that into there. There's people that buy posters and there's people that buy original art. And if you're trying to sell original art, you don't need 1 million people to make a profit on that. You just need a small group of people that are willing to pay for that. So like, if you don't want anything to do with any of this, you don't need to do it.
It's the perception.
Most art is bad. It really is. There's a very small percentage of art that's any good in the first place. Right.
We have a question in the center, please. And then in the back as well.
So I'm trying to think of how to word this. It's kind of a mix of everything that everyone said. About the authenticity, about who's willing to pay for what, about oversaturation. I guess kind of something I was thinking about, and even you guys have kind of talked about it. You can buy kid cuisine from the market, but there's still chefs and people that make wonderful food. You can make it yourself, but I'm not very good at cooking, but I can make it. But I just think about academically how it's going to affect things, kind of like you were talking about how much is okay academically. What about for for writers, just putting in a prompt and making something for an assignment, and teacher wouldn't know, they could lie about it,
Writing a term paper.
Yeah, exactly. I just wonder,
writing a
You know,
term paper, you wrote the
Of
paper.
course, I wonder how many people are going to do that. And, how does that tie into plagiarism? Will that be, I just wonder how that would all tie in. And also,
I think that it's not plagiarism, but I think it's deceitful to say that you
Yes,
wrote it,
it is,
or
of
that
course.
you made it because you did it.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody want to comment on that?
Well, it makes me think of plagiarism. I've dealt with it throughout the many decades I've been at LCAD, and it's never pleasant. The temptation is trying to, when faced with a deadline, is to copy something, trace it, use it directly. It's happened. That's a fear I have about this.
But I hear you talk about the use of the calculator, right?
Yeah.
So the use of the calculator is something that they tried to pull when I was a kid in school. They tried to make sure that there was no calculators in our pockets, right?
Yeah.
I have a calculator always in my hand, in my pocket.
Spell check.
It was presented to me like, well, you're not all